Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, the host, and today we've got a super interesting set of guests and topic. The topic is how to not overcomplicate our own success. Sometimes we can get in the way of ourselves, right? We spend a lot of time with our companies and thinking and planning and exploring, and in the end, we need the decision to hire us to be a very simple, direct answer. So we're going to talk about that today. And on the podcast, we have the CEO and founder of Meter in Griff Parry. And Griff, you actually started Meter as a solution to a problem you had at a previous company you founded. So you're a serial entrepreneur as well. And Kelly, you're marketing now. You're head of marketing at Meter, but you started in sales. You went to customer success, and then you made it over to marketing. So you've kind of been in all three pillars of the go-to-market strategy. So I love that background. And you've worked at companies like Oracle and Salesforce and startups. So I think we've got a really great background set of experiences here that we can talk from. But what I'd love to do is give you a chance before we dive in here, just to expand on your background a little bit. And maybe, Griff, if you could start, that would be great.
This is my second company as a startup founder, but the first part of my career is actually a corporate career in media and telecoms. And so by sort of functional training, I'm a strategist and a product person, but I fell into startups and I found that I love them. And you're right to call out that the problem that we're solving in Meter is one that we experienced firsthand ourselves in the previous business, which was a cloud infrastructure business. But we also saw the same problem at the company that acquired GameSparks. And so we kind of thought we're on something. So we always wanted to do another one. You need to find people to do it with and an idea to chase. And luckily had the people there. It was the same group as before. And we had the idea because we knew this was a real problem from our own experiences. So yeah, that's how we ended up.
And in a short fashion, what is it that Meter does?
Well, I'm sure we're going to go on to talk about this in the rest of the podcast, because there is a simple version of the story and there's a more complicated one. So okay. The simple version is that it automates complex bill calculation for our customers. And our customers are B2B software companies. And their problem is that when it comes to billing time, it's really difficult to work out what to put on every invoice. And there are two main drivers. Part of it is just about growing up as a company, and you have lots more unique price points as you get bigger and you have more customers and you have more products, and you have different prices and different geos and sales teams do product pricing. But the other driver is the usage, the increased adoption of usage-based pricing, which is actually really widespread in software pricing nowadays. And that creates another degree of difficulty in bill calculation, because you have to collect product usage data and apply pricing to it to work out what's going on. So the core thing is that we're solving billing, but I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot more. It's more than billing. It's actually about command of pricing and enabling your entire go-to-market. But that requires a bit of explanation. So if I've only got a few moments, I'll say we're billing infrastructure and we solve billing pain.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Kelly, maybe a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, definitely. So I am from San Francisco. So started my career, like you said, Steve, in sales at Oracle, then moved into a small startup because, that's what you do in the San Francisco Bay Area. Loved it. I did customer success there. And that company was then subsequently acquired by Salesforce. So I moved into product marketing and have sort of been in the marketing space since. I was very lucky, moved over from San Francisco to London with Salesforce. And it was really learn from the marketing powerhouse, in the industry. And so it's been fun to take a lot of those learnings and experiment with them at Meter. And we've learned a ton along the way. So we're really excited to be here and hope we share some of our learnings.
Well, then that's perfect. So this background I love, from entrepreneur to inside of some of the largest, B2B organizations that we know of in those names. I'm curious, just if you could just kind of at the very beginning here, Griff, what is your point of view on why like, why do we overcomplicate our own success, and how do we get out of the way of ourselves?
I think we're very keen to tell the story from our own perspectives, and we forget to occupy the perspectives of the people we're speaking to. And like, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, you want to tell everybody all the amazing things that what you're doing is going to achieve. And you lay out everything that you've got planned in your head over the next 5 to 10 years. But the person you're talking to only really cares about problems that they have right now. And so you need to walk in their shoes and remember that. And so I think that's the main reason, is that we don't think enough about the perspectives of our audience.
I love it. And Kelly, I know that you've thought about this from some of the biggest organizations and how they approach their go-to-market strategy. Why do we overcomplicate things, and how do we get out of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, similar to what Griff said, we need to just stay as close to the customer as we can. And I think it's easy to be selfish. Obviously, you want to grow your own business, you want to do well. And so with that comes, a lot of maybe campaigns that aren't aligned to what they should be, or you are in the wrong communities because they have a bigger following, but it's not actually where your audience is. And so I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, or we confuse ourselves. And I think to get out of it, the best way is to just always go back to your buyers. I think Griff is really good at this. Our team is good at this, at always talking to customers. On the tactical side, we listen to a lot of gong calls. That's been a great tool for our team to stay close to the customer, sort of a bit more in an at-scale model. And that helps us. That was actually one of the ways that we realized we were maybe getting a bit ahead of our skis on our marketing, overcomplicating it a bit to tie it to the theme. We were sort of positioning what maybe level 3 would look like, and really every discovery call, our customers were just looking for level 1. So I think those are some easy ways to keep checking yourself, bring it back to simple. What do they actually need to solve today? And then slowly take them on the journey with you.
And so this is not a B2B quote whatsoever, but it was a quote by Mark Twain. He said, "I didn't have a time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead."
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's very easy to try to just tell everything, but to just discern it down to the key messages that tell your audience you get it, you understand their needs, what they have to do to be successful, and beyond just your own tech, right? Your own product. Because in order to be trusted advisors, consultants to our clients, which we need to be in the B2B world, we need to understand their total, context and problems that they need to address in their job. And we're usually about this much of what they're totally responsible for. So we need to understand everything, right? And so understanding those customers is really key to that. And only then can we really start to say, okay, how do we start to really whittle this down? And Griffin, you had an interesting perspective in one of our previous conversations about being problem aware versus solution aware audiences, and how that can help us simplify things. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I think I should probably credit it to Kelly. I think she talked about the concept.
Okay.
But so something we think a lot about when we communicate to people. So actually, I'm going to introduce 3. I think there's 3 states that your audience might be in. They could be problem unaware, they could be problem aware, or they could be solution unaware, or they could be solution aware. So it's those 3 things. So the first one is they're problem unaware. If I come up to you and say, hey, you've got a billing operations problem, and you're the chief executive of the company, and you never think about billing being a priority problem for you to solve. Like, all the invoices go out and that's fine. Like, you're problem unaware. Like, it's really hard for me at that point, because I have to convince you of the existence of a problem, and you're already aware of a whole bunch of other priority problems that you want to solve. So that's not a good conversation. And we should broadly try and avoid those conversations, or deploying too much effort on those conversations. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got solution aware. So that's when somebody knows they've got a problem, they know how to think about it, and they know what the solution should be. So they're thinking about a thing that they need to buy to do the solution. So if if you work in sales, and you need to organize yourself and your sales teams to properly pursue every lead and opportunity, you need a sales CRM, and you're in the market to buy one. So you're looking at buying Salesforce or HubSpot. So that, hopefully Meter will get there eventually when people understand what it is that we and other companies like us do. And they say, oh, I need to buy a Meter. But then there's the space in the middle. So the customer or the audience is aware they've got a problem. They don't know how to think about it, and they don't know how to solve it. So in those circumstances, you need to acknowledge their problem, put your finger on it, which is the phrase that I use to explain it. Win trust for them so that they believe that you understand their pain. And then once you've established trust, start talking to them about potential solutions. But in those circumstances, when they're problem aware but solution unaware, there's no point pushing the solution because they're not confident that that's what they need. You need to start with their problem, contextualize it, and then start leading them towards the solution to it.
I love that, because I think that is a much more eloquent way than saying you can't lead with your product, right? The conversation has to be about them and their problems, and not until they are sufficiently aware of those problems and the degree that they have the problem, because most problems companies have lived with for a long time, right? And the longer we live with a problem, the more deprioritized it gets, right? Because we've just figured out how to get by without addressing it, right?
Yeah.
So Kelly, this was, I guess, your thinking that Griffin was talking about here. What I just took away there is that we need to be simplifying what we do by simplifying first what we're talking to our prospects about. And we all want to talk about our own tech. They're our babies. It's what we love. It's what we iterate on, right? It's our passion project. What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big advocate of adding value before you take value. So I think you need to really give your customers something helpful. And I think it ties in a lot to this sort of journey that Griff talked about that we're trying to implement at Meter. And I think if only 5% of the market is ready to buy, what do you do with the 95%? You need to help educate them, add value, and not alienate them by trying to push them into a sales cycle before they're ready. So I think that's sort of the simple phrase I try to remember is add value before you take it, be helpful. And I think this is leading now to a big shift in how marketing is effective is, ungate content, don't push people into big marketing automation flows that aren't relevant and personalized to them. People want to feel seen and heard. And so how do you deliver that long before they'll ever consider filling out a contact us form?
Fortune magazine had an article out where one of the quotes out of that article was, content marketing solves problems, thought leadership sparks conversations. And that's what we want, especially in this day and age of the self-service B2B buyer journey, where they're 80+% of the way through their decision-making before they actually want to engage with a salesperson or a product, person inside of the organization. They're making their decisions in advance. So this is all about simplifying. What you're saying here, and just putting more context behind it, is our job is to spark conversations earlier in their journey, not after they've made most of their decisions and they're down to their short list. And how we do that, to your point, is by adding value. And that's 95% of the market, right? So there was a brilliant woman, 3-time B2B CMO, came on. She said, Steve, today's brand is tomorrow's demand. What she's saying is what we do with that 95%, that's tomorrow's demand that we're going to act on, that we're going to try to bring into our pipeline. But if we simplify things, we should be thinking about how do we spark those conversations, right? and be framing that conversation where people think about this problem as they move into, oh, this is a problem that I need to address, right? And this is a bigger problem than I think it is. So I love this. So right away, we've simplified the process. It's about talking about them and their problems and their job before we want to talk about us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly, to join the streams, sorry to jump in, thought leadership works better with problem aware but solution unaware people. Because if you want to provoke thought or conversation, that's what thought leadership does, is that you want them to get to think about their problem and think about the right solutions to that problem. So it needs to be slightly, provocative. So yeah.
Absolutely. And the problem aware, solution unaware is the larger part of the market, right? That's where we're gonna have, if we're gonna drive pipeline, it's gonna come out of that, right? If they're already solution aware, they're already looking, they're already doing their research, they're well down the path, right? And unless we're an organization like a Salesforce or an Oracle where everybody knows us, right? And we're gonna probably make a short list, right? We have to introduce ourselves before the short list gets started. And so I love this. So the idea, tell me you talked again, Griffin, about the definition and implications of this problem aware, solution aware. What are some of the strategies that we can take as an organization to reach out and simplify our message in this problem aware, audience? Like, how do we've identified, okay, that's where we need to be, and we need to be talking about them. How do we think about doing that? What should we be doing to get ourselves ready?
Well, one of the things that we did, which goes back to the theme of this podcast, is we had to deliberately tell only part of the story to ensure simple messaging and cut through. So there was a trade-off there. So what we were basically doing is talking about a problem they knew they had and starting to think about solutions for that problem. Now, there are a whole bunch of other problems that they also had, but they weren't necessarily aware that they did. But we didn't want to complicate by talking about those. Right. We just wanted to focus on, this is the salient problem. This is where my roof is burning. Let's talk about that. And then go from there and treat it as a sort of foundation. Then you build the conversation from there. So that was quite a big thing for us. Like, don't try to do too much. Be actually quite simple on your messaging.
And Kelly, you talked about, no, go ahead. She has more to talk about.
I was just going to put some meat on the bones and sort of like tell a story about what this is from our point of view, because I think it's sort of an illustrative example. So remember my background. I'm solving a problem we had before. So our previous company was called GamesBox. We're a cloud infrastructure business. We had usage-based pricing, and we did reasonably chunky enterprise sales. So we had a problem once a month at bill time. It was incredibly difficult to work out what to put on the bills. And we had this awkward process where we had the monster spreadsheet that was looked after by a finance person, and they needed to talk to an engineer who would do a data extract of all the usage. And they'd bring it into the spreadsheet, they'd calculate the bills, and then they would basically transfer the amounts into the invoicing system. So that's the problem that we thought we had. It's like, we got a billing problem. But actually, we had loads of other problems. We just didn't think about them as being connected. Like, we had problems like customers keep asking us in the middle of the month how much they've used and what their bill is on track to be. And we thought that as a customer success problem, but it needed exactly the same stuff, the same calculations, just done continuously in the middle of the month. But we didn't think about it as connected. We thought about it as billing problem. Or similarly, don't we have customers or prospective customers where they'd say, look, I like your pricing, but can we tweak it a little bit because that meets my needs? And we go, well, we can't really do that because we'd have to completely rebuild our spreadsheet, and that's a bit risky and quite a lot of work. So we had a pricing agility problem that was a blocker to new sales, but we didn't think about that either. We thought about it as a billing problem, and that's absolutely typical of our customers now. So when we solve their problems. We're solving their billing problem, but we're also solving the availability of data about usage and spend throughout the whole organization to enable the whole go-to-market and good customer experiences. We're making it much easier to flexibly change prices, which really unlocks product development and unlocks sales to do the right deals to win and retain accounts. But we don't talk about any of that. We go, you've got a billing problem, don't you? And they go, yes. And then you go. So we learned this through trial and error. It's like we would say less and less and less and less at first contact. And then we finally went, let's just deliver the kernel. That starts the conversation, and then we can go from there.
I love that. Because I know deep down inside, I'm a SaaS founder myself. You want to be like, but guys, you got a pricing problem, you got a sales problem, right? You got a customer success problem, you got all, and you want to like literally say, okay, we needed an hour and a half of this conversation, right? Because there's so much that I have to say, that so much we can help you with. But what I took away from what you said there is you need to get into the right conversation. If you can get into the conversation, then you can expand that conversation and introduce additional ways that you help and uncover problems and solve problems that they weren't realizing that they had.
Right? And you get into the conversation by identifying an acute pain point, because that creates the motivation for their engagement. And then when you've got your attention, you can, educate them about other things. But don't waste time educating them up front. Like, you want to put your finger on the thing that hurts them.
So, Kelly, I know that you had a point of view on understanding that pain point is understanding your customers, right? Understanding your ICP. And you can't simplify and you can't solve that pain point, talk simply to that pain point unless you really understand who they are. Tell us a little bit more about, your thoughts on the ICP, understanding who they are, and getting to that kind of simple, here's what we can do for you message.
Yeah, so I think this is actually the second piece to exactly the puzzle that Griff was sort of talking about. Is we started with getting our messaging. Well, actually, first we started with getting our ICP even more specific. And then that allows you to then have an even more specific message. And that's another thing we've been learning on and working on over the last few months is who exactly is our ICP? What do they look like from revenue, customers, industry? What else were we looking at, Griff, that I'm missing? Pricing model, just more and more and more specific. And that's then allowed our messaging to get more specific. So we're attracting the right people. And when we get on a call, sort of how we've been describing it is we say like, hey, we see you, you're a fit. And they say the same to us. And that's when you know that you've hopefully found your ICP, is that you get on a call, the discovery call goes well for both people because they're seeing a solution that makes sense to them and their challenges, you can exactly solve. And that's obviously the ideal match made in heaven scenario.
It's like meeting somebody.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. Sorry. No, I was going to say it's like meeting that idea of they see you and you see them. It's like meeting somebody from your hometown.
Oh, I love
we understand each other.
Yeah, you're talking as colleagues, right? You're not talking as vendor to work, to sales prospect. The thing that I think is really interesting about this too is there is a tendency for ICP expansion all the time, right? We have quotas in our organization for people in the sales organization that, you've got to hit this quota, and how are we track it? And how's next, quarter's quota going? And we report to the board, and they want to know some of these very simple KPIs. And so to fulfill those quotas, we have a tendency to want to expand who we talk to, right? Expand our audience. But in doing so, we make it harder to message, to simply, say how we can help solve your problems. And then we bring in also, customers that aren't ideal for the company, and we're not resourced properly to address them. And they churn quicker, and all of a sudden our NRR scores are going down, and it creates additional problems. So this idea of simplifying is not only about simplifying our message to close more deals, but it's to bring the right deals in too. Right?
Yes,
definitely.
It's sometimes hard to say no, that I don't think we're the right fit. Right. But sometimes we need to do that. So how do we put this into practice? Right. And the first audience for all of this, and you guys brought this up, was internal communication. Right. How the simplification of the ICP and the message, how do you communicate that internally? And why is that the most important audience to begin with?
First it's practice, which helps. Second, like really understanding the customer and their problem guides and orients pretty much everything anybody's doing in the company. I mean, if you're building a product, you have to intimately understand your customer and what they want to do with it. Similarly, if you're anywhere in the go-to-market team, you need to understand the language your customers speak and the problems they have. So it's incredibly important. I mean, for me, culturally, like I was like functionally a product person, and that's very much like that customer centricity is a key part of what product people do. And then we sold our first company to Amazon, and that is absolutely customer obsessed, that organization, to the extent that they, you've heard the story about having an empty chair in the room. I didn't actually ever see that, but the idea was that, it was a reminder that the customer is the priority in all that we do. And so, yeah, I think that's the reason why you need to do it with the internal organizations. And then in terms of how, you've got to write it down and you've got to talk it through. And then you're looking for your internal audiences to respond positively and say, yeah, that feels right. And if they don't, then keep going because it's not resonating.
I think just to complement what Griff is saying, a few other things that we've done tactically is every Friday we have a company all hands. And on the last Friday of every month, we bring in a customer to be interviewed. And that's great exposure then for the whole company. And it's sort of a tell-all. It's, why did you buy Meter? What were your pain points? How's it going? What feedback do you have for our product team? And so that's a great way for the entire company, no matter what role you're in, to all know, okay, now we know, Shelly, and you can identify that persona with a real customer. So that's one thing that I think we've done. You're gonna ask me, Griff?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, in terms of the benefit, I love that we do that. And I think it works. I'm trying to work out why it's a good thing. So, what they say does matter. It's like, that gives us an insight into the problems that they had, and that sort of helps educate our broader teams. But I also think the benefit is just reminding everybody that the customer exists. It's the equivalent of the empty chair in the AWS meeting room.
Yeah, I think you can be a real person, and that's motivating. I mean, that's why you're building a company, is to see the actual changes you can make in a person's life. Like, that's good messaging, is like emotive, and they read something like, oh my gosh, they get me. And so if you have the whole company rallying around a real person, your product's going to be better, customer support's going to be better, your message will be better.
Can I add something to this? It's like, these aren't the chief execs. These are the roles that benefit from the product. So when Kelly says, oh, you really, it's emotive, it's because somebody goes, my life was a nightmare before and now it's much better. Thank you so much.
I can see how it's like kind of bringing the story to life. You bring the story in and you hear it directly from the customer, how you impacted them, how much you helped them, and how much more motivational that can be. Now, every day when you're doing your job, you can visualize who you're doing it for and why you're doing it and how it helps, and how what you do is a part of the contribution in total that the company adds. And I think that's brilliant. If each of you could think of the one most important takeaway that you want people to have from this podcast in terms of why we need to get out of our own way to simplify everything, what would that be? And what would you want to leave us with?
I would. Should I go first here?
Sure, go for it.
I feel mean because I might be bad to say what Kelly is going to say, but for me, it's inhabiting the perspectives of the person you're speaking to is the most important thing to do. Like if you hope to have cut through, you have to see the world through their eyes, and it takes time to properly understand those perspectives. But it's well worth it. That investment really pays back.
Obviously, I agree with that. The other thing that I think about, I guess that would be my takeaway, which we haven't quite touched on yet, but I think that like a buyer is a person just like you are. And so actually what I do a lot, even though I'm not in billing operations or finance, I'm not in the role of our target persona, but they're still a person like me. And like I still know how I like to buy, what turns me off in a sales process, what is when someone's selling to me, when am I like, wow, like there's a newsletter a lot of our team follows. It feels like every week we're like, wow, he has mic'd our team meetings, this is super tactical. And so it's just like, while you're selling to someone different, don't do something that you wouldn't want done to you. Like engage them in a sales process or a marketing journey that you would enjoy. Be creative, be helpful, have some personality, have examples. Like that's how people want to buy now. The B2B playbook is totally changing. And so I think just lean into that. What do you like? And then apply that to building a great customer journey. Obviously adding in what your persona likes, but it's easy to start with creating something that a human like you would enjoy.
I'm going to share with you guys, I'm going to add to the main takeaway is we have to work on being simple. It doesn't just naturally happen.
Yes.
So it's a lot of hard work to get to the point where you can make it simple. And if you can make it simple, it is the number one expression of the experience of what it's going to be like to work with us.
Yeah. Something we use. Go ahead, Griff.
Sorry, okay. No, you go.
I was just going to say something we say, Steve, along that lines is you want to be able to explain something like you're at a barbecue with someone. And I think every time we do a messaging review, we're like, is it barbecue speak? Is it barbecue speak? And it's asking that question, just like you were saying over and over and over. Is it simple enough? Is it simple enough? Is it simple enough? And keep going down. What are you going to say?
When Kelly says we say that's what Kelly says to me most of the time. It's like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Would you say that at a barbecue? And I'm prone to using quite long words. And she's like, you can't use that word. That's ridiculous. The other quote that I like, which is exactly the same concept, is the Einstein quote. I think it's Einstein. Which is if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it well enough yourself. It's the same thing. And so I genuinely think about it when I try and explain what I do to my children. Remember, it can appear quite boring. Like building infrastructure isn't necessarily the most exciting topic. But if I can explain, like, this is why it matters to these people and changes their lives, they go, okay, that's right, Dad. So yeah, it's distillation, isn't it? Like, what's the essence? Communicate.
And work hard at it. We need to work hard at it, which is probably why Kelly always constantly asks you that question, right? Do we work at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
If there was additional questions that people had, would it be appropriate that we gave out links to your LinkedIn profiles that people could reach out and ask those questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to help.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, guys. I have a feeling we could go on for another hour or so here, but I just appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences from out your careers and your endeavors with all of us. And just to say that this is the rising tide that lifts all boats. If we can share with our peer community of other marketers and CEOs, founders and CFOs and chief revenue officers, then we all make each other better. So thank you for coming on and taking part in the podcast.
Thank you very much for joining us.